Hi, I'm George Levy for blocksEDU, and today I'm having the opportunity to speak with George Murnane, the CEO of Jet Token. George, great to see you.
George, thank you. Pleasure meeting you.
Yeah, I actually was looking forward to this interview because the last time that I had heard about Jet Token, I had actually spoken to the chairman of the company, Mike.
Sure.
And at the time, we'd been talking about his vision for developing what is now Jet Token, but to see it actually here. And from what you've been sharing with me as far as the operations of this business, thank you and all the very best. What a great vision.
Well, thank you for coming and spending the time. I mean, we're very excited about what's going on here, and we just love telling the story.
Yeah, one of the cool things about the conversation is that you've been explaining to me some of the day-to-day operations of what are going here. One thing that was cool was actually you were showing me what was going on in this screen. Tell me exactly what this is, because it was really, really cool.
Sure. Right now, we're actually tracking a Honda jet that's flying from Rangeley, Colorado to Salt Lake City. And as you can see, he's probably about 2/3 of the way there. He's at 19,600 feet, flying at 383 knots, doing it 5:04. So, in what, 10 minutes?
One of the things that I find interesting about this conversation is, first, we're going to start with what is Rangeley? Because it's like, when I think about what is Rangeley?
Well, Rangeley is obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but Rangeley is a private airport. It's located in the northwest of Colorado. Its runway is just over 6,000 feet. So, this is a typical business jet flight where you're not going from a commercial airport like Denver or Colorado Springs, but my guess is they're probably going to Salt Lake City maybe to go skiing.
Yeah, but the interesting thing about it is, first off, the fact that this person's actually flying from an airport, which I haven't heard before, also would, first off, I'm sure there's a whole footprint of private airports.
There are thousands of airports
and
like
that's the kind of thing, it's a whole new world that normally, because I fly a lot, but I fly commercial. And when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about Miami International Airport to JFK, for instance. But in the world of private flight, sometimes it might not make sense to fly into JFK. So tell me more
but it also might not make sense to fly out of Miami. I mean, I don't know where you live, but obviously you've got Miami, you've got Fort Lauderdale, you've got West Palm.
That would be the only, if you think about it,
exactly.
It's the only thing I would think about.
But there are probably 4 or 5 other private airports.
Interesting.
Fort Lauderdale Executive as an example, where that might be closer to your home, much more convenient. And instead of flying into JFK or LaGuardia or Newark, which could be a nightmare, fly into
Not to mention that you're dealing with thousands and thousands of people, which you have no idea.
Right.
And you're just crowded going through TSA, and you're right?
Yeah, but forget on the front end. I mean, as an example, there's a private service here. When you get off the plane, commercially, now you've got to go through, the whole concourse. You have to wait till everybody gets off the plane. That's a nightmare. Where when you're flying privately, you get off the plane, you walk to the fixed base operation, which is 100 feet away, and there's a taxi for you. Mm-hmm. It couldn't be easier. So the amount of time that you save flying privately is just tremendous.
See, and the average person has no idea that that's even available.
Right.
Right? And the question that I found most interesting about the conversation that I had with Mike, the vision as he had portrayed it was democratizing private flight. Just basically making it available to the average person.
Yes. And the first step in that, frankly, is to educate them. Right? Because I'm sure, if you wanted to book private, would you know how to go?
I have no idea what to do with it.
And
mind you, I don't even think about it because it's really not an option that's viable in my mind for me to even consider.
Right. And when I talk to people, wealthy people who haven't been flying privately, they'll say the same thing.
Right. Well, we don't know where to start.
Exactly. And so with our app, that makes it a lot easier. And I sort of hearken back to the days of, the travel agents for flying commercially. You went through your local travel agent, but you had no idea what the prices were, what was available. You were just shown something, and you were told this is what it's going to cost.
Yeah.
Then Expedia came along, and all of a sudden, you were in control. We're trying to do the same thing on the private jet side.
Yeah. The other thing that was interesting about the conversation and why I had even originally spoken to Mike is I'm very heavily involved in the blockchain space. And Jet Token actually, beyond merely the name Jet Token, but the fact is that blockchain is very actively involved in what you do. Tell me more about that
Sure.
aspect.
There are actually two aspects to it. There's the blockchain aspect in terms of, if you will, the whole block hours that we sell, as well as the fractional interest in the aircraft, and that's all managed on the blockchain. And it makes it much easier, I should say, for you as a fractional owner or as a block hour owner, if you will, to monetize those hours that you have already purchased through the blockchain.
So basically, these are actually assets that are actually recorded on the blockchain.
Exactly.
And when you're talking, you said something really interesting, and I don't want to derail you, but you talked about fractional ownership on
Right.
Interesting.
So we will sell fractions in an aircraft, and that will be recorded, if you will, on the blockchain.
So if you want to own a plane, like I don't think I could own a full plane, or at least at this moment, not yet.
Soon.
But but the key question is, I still would have an option to buy a fraction of the plane.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly.
Okay.
But as an example, if that fraction of the plane enabled you to use 100 hours a year at whenever you wanted, and you said, you know what, I don't want to fly over Christmas. It's a nightmare. I don't want to have to deal with it. But there were people that wanted to fly over Christmas but didn't have the hours. They could,
very interesting,
if you will, trade hours with you, for that, and you might end up with more hours than you otherwise would have.
Let me ask you another question. In terms of, you said there were two uses for blockchain technology.
Right.
One of them is, I guess, keeping a permanent and immutable record of all these assets. But the other aspect?
The other aspect is actually on the payment side.
Okay.
Because one of the biggest problems that private jet operators have is getting paid. And I don't mean that people won't pay you, but typically these are last minute flights, and you don't do the flight unless you're paid. So if someone calls up on a Friday evening, wants to fly over the weekend, how do you get paid? You can't do a wire transfer. That doesn't work.
Right.
You may not have enough credit. I mean, even with American Express Black Card, you still may not have enough credit. Now, to the extent that we offer or we accept crypto, hey, that's cheaper for you and it's quick and easy.
So you're able to, so if I wanted to book a flight, and actually, let's say I assume, and so all of this is available on the app.
Yes.
The app will give me the option to pay, whether it's with fiat currency or
crypto.
I could use cryptocurrency.
Yes.
And that's all handled by, you actually offer that directly.
Right.
Very, very interesting. Right now, one of the things is that you run the day-to-day operations for this.
Yes.
If somebody actually wants to book a flight, they can merely go right now to the App Store on Apple?
They would download the app, from the Apple App Store, and in version 2.0, which will come in a couple of months, you'll be able to do it on Android as well. But you've got the app, on the first page, if you will, you have to input, where you want to go, point A to point B, date, time, how many passengers, and the minimum aircraft size that you're willing to accept. So you press enter. You will then be provided a list of aircraft and indicative prices. So you can look at the aircraft, see which one you might want to use, select that, press send. That gets sent to us. We then confirm the pricing and the availability of that flight. It's all done, if you will, behind the scenes. You don't have to do anything more. At the same time, because we know that aircraft may not be available, we will actually go out to other operators, with other aircraft to see their availability and to see what their pricing will be. So then we'll come back to you and we'll say either, well, your aircraft isn't available, but we have these additional options, or your aircraft is available, but you might want to think about these other options.
And all of that happens transparently for me through the use of this app.
Exactly.
Got it. The key thing I would ask you is, and just to put things in context, you were showing me a flight here, but in parallel to all this thing, right now people are booking and they're basically using your services, but it's international. It's anywhere around the world.
Anywhere in the world.
So anybody that downloads this app, whether that person's in London or that person's in Miami or wherever that person may be, they could just download it and they can use it.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, recently we were working a flight from the US to Africa.
Interesting. Very interesting. And the thing is that normally people don't think about that. Like a perfect thing that I will tell you is that I normally don't think about private flight because I would think the average folks can't actually fly private. But you're talking about democratizing. Is there an option for someone that may normally not fly private, but they don't fly private because they simply don't know what's available?
True. There is a concept called the empty legs. Now, when these private jets are booked and they're going from point A to point B.
Empty legs.
Right. And it's, as the name implies, the plane has to return or go somewhere else empty. Right? So that's an expense that the operator is going to incur regardless. So he then advertises that he has an empty leg available. And we have access to those operators, advertising it. It's on our app.
It is included in the app.
It is included in the app. And so you could say, okay, I see that this person has to go from, let's say, West Palm to, Boston. And you want to go from Miami to New York.
Sure.
Now, he might be willing to pick you up, or he might say, listen, if you're willing to go to West Palm, we'll drop you off at Teterboro, and instead of you paying, $25,000, just give us $5,000.
So let me ask you, like you said, Teterboro. And that's a private airport.
That's a private airport just outside of New York, but
which is like Rangeley. It's an airport that normally the average person doesn't know about, but they're available out there.
Right, and it's a very convenient airport, for people in the New York area.
And the question I would ask you is, you mentioned a price point of around $5,000, but the question is, are there more affordable options as well?
There are some operators that will, if you will, sell by the seat, and you can have access to that as well. I personally have taken advantage of that. I fly a lot between Phoenix and Las Vegas here, and I've had flights as low as $69.
Wow. Now, mind you, I would think that's not usual, because the truth is, I would go out of my way, but the truth is, I'm sure that's actually not very common.
It's more common than you think, particularly, oddly enough. American Airlines occasionally offers $55 flights, but the experience on this, even if they were selling it for twice the price.
Sure, it still would be a great price.
Yeah, you rock up 15 minutes beforehand, you get on the plane.
As opposed to 3 hours and waiting in line and then
the
taking
TSA
off your shoes.
And all that stuff, none of
that's included.
So, you get on the plane takes off, lands in Phoenix. When I fly commercially into Phoenix, I sort of have to wait until I get to the gate, call my wife, ask her to come and pick me up. Here, the minute I land, I'm telling my wife, okay, go start the drive, and I will typically beat her, to the gate.
And mind you, the key thing that I would tell you is that a lot of this, and this is why I was so intrigued in actually doing this interview, is the fact that this is a world that normal people are not aware of. And I'll tell you specifically, like a key thing, whenever I look up at the sky, and I'm just telling you, and I see like these private, planes that are coming by, and I'm saying, I wonder who's up there. And now you mentioned sometimes they're flying empty.
Right.
No?
Yeah.
Got it. So there's probably inventory that I'm not aware of. That plane has to fly somewhere for some reason, and they might as well sell me a seat.
Exactly. And the other thing I would say is, when you're looking up, it's probably not the 1%er up there. It's probably some mid-level executive of a company that's flying from one plant to another. And it's just a very efficient way for that company to get its if you will, human capital around.
Right. And the key thing about it, and this is what's interesting about this whole conversation, is that this is a world that normally people don't talk about or even consider.
Right.
But the answer is it's a very efficient way of moving. And I think this is one of the things that I found most interesting about the conversation I had with Mike, was that in my mind I always thought, well, you want to fly private just because it's style. You're flying in a jet plane, and you're right. But the truth is sometimes it's a million times more convenient.
It's productivity.
Got it.
I mean, it's really a way of leveraging productivity. And that's what people need to focus on, because it just makes you so much more productive.
Yeah, and the thing I would ask you, just to put into context, because the main reason why we're having this conversation and why I wanted to have this is you are working the operations for Jet Token. So right now there are people working around, and at this moment there may be multiple reservations coming in for people just trying to get flights to do these things, and Jet Token handles all that.
Yes, yes. So you don't have to worry, once you hit send, the next thing that you will know is you will get a call from Jet Token or an email saying, that flight of yours, here are your options, here are the prices, what do you want to do? The price is all inclusive, you don't need to worry about anything else.
When you say all-inclusive, just to put into context, I'm thinking about the context in my mind. If I don't fly, like when I buy a ticket from, say, a major carrier, whether it's Delta, American Airlines, or whatever, I think, well, I know it's going to be safe because it's Delta, right? And the question is, when you say all-inclusive, you're basically, I don't have anything to worry about. Safe flight, all the gas is paid, all the fees are paid, no extra taxes. When I pay you, I'm done.
Yes. Now, I mean, safety's, a very important aspect. And because of its importance, there are actually 3 different auditors or audit firms that audit operators. And so, Gamma Aviation, who's our partner along with HondaJet, has the highest rating from all 3, but we will only charter, if we're not using our own aircraft, from those operators who also have high safety ratings. But also, to your point, all the gas, all the catering, landing fees, parking fees, all of that. It's one price. It isn't one of these, well, it's that price, plus you got to pay the landing fee, plus the catering. And oh, by the way, if you want to bring 2 bags, you've got to pay this. And
the question I would ask you, just because I'm trying to put myself in a situation would be, I download your app and I can immediately be looking at different options.
Yes.
And when I find an option that makes sense to me and I pay, you take care of letting me know exactly everything I need to do, where I need to be, at what time I need to be there.
Phone numbers, the plane, the tail number, typically also the pilot's names, their cell phone numbers.
See, that's a very different experience from flying. Like, I never know who my pilot. Well, I guess they might announce him, I'm your pilot, whatever. But the truth is, you're spending a lot of time with this guy. His life, your life is in their hands, and maybe your family's life is in their hands. You get to know all of this, and that's actually as part of the reservation process. You get that.
Yes, exactly.
The other thing that I found interesting that Mike was talking about is, like, there's the idea of merely doing a simple transaction of getting a flight, but there's also a membership component available. It's an option for someone to become a member.
Yes, and I sort of touched on that briefly earlier, where there's obviously the ad hoc charter aspect, which we've been talking about, but also to those people who fly more frequently than, once every other blue moon, if you fly, say, 25 hours a year, probably makes sense for you to buy a block of 25 hours.
So that's where you fit in, like the membership component would be in buying blocks of these.
Exactly.
Okay,
because what that does for you, in addition to getting a lower price, is it guarantees you availability. Right? Because if you're on an ad hoc basis, you're subject to market whims. Aircraft may not be available. Right? If it's, the Sunday after Thanksgiving, that's a difficult time to find an aircraft. But if you've bought the 25-hour, block, we have to get you an aircraft if that day is one of the days you want to fly.
That's actually very, very interesting. And I'm very glad to know that this service is available and that anybody can download the app.
Sure.
George, all the very best to you and Jet Token. Very, very exciting.
No, listen, we're excited, and thanks so much for coming and letting us tell you the story.
Excellent. George, all the very best.
Yes, you too.
Awesome.
Yep.
For blocksEDU, I'm George Levy. Thank you for watching.